Hello, hello, everyone. Just give a few moments for everyone to join us. Hope everyone's been having a good week so far. We're just going to give a few moments here. Todd's in a meeting, so it might take him just a moment to hop in here with us as well. Nice to see we have some regulars. Welcome, Jim. Junior Washburn, Nerneth. Nice to see you guys. Hey there, Todd. Can't hear you there, boss, if you're talking.
How about now, Justin?
There we go. How's it
How are
going?
you? I'm doing well, thank you. Hope everybody is doing well and welcome. I think we went ahead and started the event.
Yeah, got it already started. Just waiting on some people to join us here.
Awesome.
Nice morning on the east side of the states for you this morning, Todd.
Yeah, very nice morning. Probably going to be in the 80s today. It's finally starting to cool off a little bit. The CPI numbers came out today, as you probably saw. So the market had an initial kind of nice reaction. It's starting to drop, which is good. We were up in the 9% range, and we were expecting 8.7%, and it dropped down to about 8.5%. So the market likes it.
Interesting. Good to see. It's been nice. We've finally started to get some rain over on my end of the state. It's
Up there in the desert.
yeah, monsoon season's hit us, so it'll be nice and hot, and then you'll just get like a 30-minute super gnarly storm out of nowhere, and then back to hot again.
Yeah. Well, thanks everybody for joining. I guess we can go ahead and get started, and we'll see as people come in. If anyone has any questions, as always, please go ahead and raise your hand, and we would love to hear from you. I see a lot of familiar faces, so that's great to hear. One thing I wanted to ask you, Justin, is something that was put in the chat last week, and I think it came in the office hours chat once we were done. Big Jim had said in there, he managed to use a laptop in Gemini and had some small farmers running on a laptop in Ubuntu VM in Windows. Also had it running on a Raspberry Pi, but the spinning disk could not keep up, hoping to resurrect that setup. I know there were some updates that were being done to address some of the farming aspects. Is that something that maybe you can just talk about for a second to lend any clarity?
Yeah, so they've been making various improvements to the farming. One thing in particular that they've focused on is there was some random I/O issues with the way that data was being accessed on hard drives, comparatively to like SSDs, for example. So the development team has made some significant improvements on that front. So hopefully we should be able to see an increased, I guess, profitability, if you will, when it comes to hard drive miners or farmers. So in theory, we should be able to see it on the Raspberry Pi once it's come out. But I would definitely be curious to have. We do have a pre-release out, Jim. If you wanted to test that out on your Raspberry Pi and give us any insight, that would definitely be appreciated. But yeah, so we're hoping we should be closer to that Raspberry Pi goal of a setup. So obviously we'll just have to test and see how we go. They are still making some progress on updates, so I would definitely look out for any future releases here coming shortly as well. But as I mentioned, there is that pre-release that came out, I think, July 27th. So that should have some of the improvements that have already been made. So definitely would be curious to hear anybody's feedback on that.
That's great. Good update, Justin. Thank you for that. I think it's very important that we keep communicating. We have people that are still running these nodes, which is wonderful as we prepare for the next iteration of the testnet, which will be coming soon. As far as the timeline for that goes, Justin, I know we haven't said anything too specific, but if we're looking at weeks, months, I know we're all anxious to get our nodes up and running again. Approximately what are we looking at there?
Yeah, so we're kind of aiming for, I would say, weeks. I wouldn't expect it to go into the months category. I would say, without giving anything away, for sure we should expect it by the end of September, but ideally, hopefully, a little bit sooner than that, assuming obviously the development team can keep making the progress as the rock stars they are. But hopefully, here in the coming weeks, I would say, maybe anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks would probably be the hot spot for the deliverability range. But definitely make sure you have our notifications on our announcement channel on, because the Discord server will be the first to hear.
Yeah, that's perfect. And as you said, we also put these things out on Twitter. We have a Telegram channel, and of course, in Discord. We kind of jumped ahead there a little bit, but so to drop back, thank you everybody for joining today. This is our weekly office hours. I'm Todd. I'm here with Justin. He is the head of our community support, and we're here to answer all your questions. So once again, just please raise your hand if you'd like to say anything. You can go ahead and put something in the chat, which would be fine as well, and we'll try to get to all the questions. A few quick announcements, I guess, for housekeeping. We are going to be switching the structure of office hours a little bit. And after today, we are going to go to a format of every 2 weeks. So there will not be office hours next week. It will be the following week. So August 24th will be our next office hours. We're just going to this every other week format for the time being. So we make sure that we have valuable content for everybody. Once we release the next incentivized testnet, Gemini 2 comes out. If it's necessary, we're certainly open to doing this more often, because we want to help everyone and get their questions answered. But we also don't want to waste everyone's time. We appreciate you coming here every week and hearing the updates and your interest in Subspace. We want to make sure that we're using everyone's time as optimally as possible. So we will be switching to a 2-week format going forward. Aside from that, as I mentioned, every week we are hiring. If you have any skills that you think would be valuable in the blockchain space, you can check out our job section on subspace.network. Of course, we're looking for mods, people to work in the community forums on Discord, people to help in Telegram. And of course, we have the ambassador program. And Justin, you've been pretty involved with that as we go. Maybe you can just talk about, I don't think we've said when the next tranche is going to be, but there were also some updates that we covered last time about the tranche we just took in. So how's the ambassador program going?
Yeah, the ambassador program has been going pretty well. Shouts out to Diana and the rest of the community team who've been working pretty tirelessly on that. Finally got the cohort brought in, got them all selected and everything. They've currently been going through their onboarding process. So obviously, with each cohort, we keep revamping our onboarding process, just trying to make that 10% improvement each time. So now they're running through that process, just becoming those subspace experts that we hope that they can become. Overall, I've been very impressed with this cohort. We saw a vast amount of applications for a pretty small amount of spots, and because of that, we've seen some really, really high quality people, that are experts in their respective fields coming on to help us out. Which even though they're ambassadors and aren't full staff, we're definitely excited to have them on board and utilize those various skills that they all have in various fashions. Really exciting, because when you start off, obviously your selection process is a little bit more limited. So it's really interesting to see just the quality of some of the people that we're starting to get in here. People that are almost experienced as some of our staff in respective areas. So it's really awesome to see. On that same note, actually, looks like we have a question from one of our new ambassadors, Junior Washburn.
I see that. You want to go ahead and invite him up to the stage? I know I've corresponded with him in the past as well. I'm going to go ahead and invite you to speak. If you go ahead and accept that invitation. How's it going, Junior Washburn? Can't hear you. Well, looks like maybe there's a slight technical problem there. You go ahead and work on that. We'd love to hear from you if we can get that resolved. So you just go ahead and speak if you get that settled. In the meantime, Justin, why don't we just continue along until we hear from Junior Washburn and talk about what's going on. So Subspace came out with a newsletter that we will be putting out where we are addressing a lot of the R&D initiatives going on in the ecosystem, some blog updates, and kind of, I wouldn't necessarily call it a complete shift in our narrative, but kind of a new approach, Justin, the way that we're positioning Subspace and what we see is the value proposition. So what's happening there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, there we go.
There he is. How are you?
Good. Sorry about that. My name's Jonathan. So I have a couple of questions about the node versus the farmer and just the split of responsibilities there between those processes. I understand the node, and is this an okay forum for that question?
Oh, of course. Yeah, please go ahead.
So I understand the node handles networking and the farmer's handling storage, but I'm a little confused about why you're specifying archive or full node and how many blocks to keep on the node itself. I would have thought that was more storage related, so I think I'm missing something about the separation of duties there.
Yeah, so the node itself is basically a default substrate node, which is the framework that we use. So as you mentioned, it handles the general networking to the actual blockchain. And it also handles the node properties of like a general node on any other network that you would expect. So in Substrate, that node also stores, the history of the network that it's connected to. So that can be an archival node or a full node, which, is only, or even a light node, for example, that only stores certain block headers. So that's kind of like your traditional crypto setup. Now with Subspace, obviously, we have our, like you mentioned, the farmer with the storage aspect. So in the long term, the node will store all of its, the farmer will store all of the, archival data and stuff like that within your plots. And the node won't necessarily have to have all this extra space to store archival nodes and things like that. But effectively, with the current, early version of Subspace, what's occurring is the node is storing part of the history, and then your farmer is also storing part of the history. Now, the node is just kind of keeping it there for availability reasons, versus the farmer is what's actually doing that consensus and plotting it and everything along those lines. That is one of the things that we can expect to be improved in this next version with what's called the decentralized storage network. So that will be when nodes will sync off of farmer plots instead of other nodes' archives. So we're slowly and continuously trying to work the node storage as to a minimal place as possible. But kind of in this middle ground, yeah, there is a little bit of a duplication of storage there.
Thanks, that's helpful.
Of course. Was there any other questions I could answer for you?
I actually have 100, but I won't ask them. If you get bored and no questions show up, I have a few more.
Sounds good, Jonathan. Thank you.
It looked like Jesse had a question there for a moment. Jesse, your hand was up and he's asking to speak. So I'm going to go ahead and invite you to the stage and come on up. Hi, Jesse, welcome.
Hey. Thank you for putting me up. Quick question. Just an introduction. I'm Jesse. I'm a researcher at VVV, and I have a quick question about your ecosystem. Will there be incentive programs for different applications or new protocols in the near future, or is that even a plan?
Yeah, so you meaning like a grant program or something along those lines? Definitely. Great question. So we do definitely have plans for that. Being an L1 and in our eyes almost more of an L0, we see ourselves as a really good infrastructure layer for the crypto ecosystem. That being, obviously, we need things to build on top of Subspace, so we do plan to have a very strong developer ecosystem. Obviously, we're going to have a grant program here in the future. We want to do some of those fun things like hackathons and different building programs such as that, because definitely beyond the farmers, obviously, which is what we're trying to establish now, developers are going to be the next most vital piece to our puzzle, if you will. So we haven't quite announced anything fully detailed just yet, but we do have big plans for grant programs and just really trying to empower developers as best as possible, just to make you all, experts in Subspace and utilize our protocol to the best of the ability.
Awesome. That sounds great. And it's the right move, in my opinion. And I see you moving in the right direction with that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Would you mind if I ask another question?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. Are there any protocols looking to already build on your LC role?
We definitely do have some discussions ongoing with various different projects. I don't want to, release anything, but definitely some names that you've probably heard. One that we have already started, or actually a while ago started to integrate with, was Polkadot. We have what we call the relayer, so it effectively relays all of the valid blocks from the Polkadot and Kusama relay chains and backs them up onto the Subspace network. That was something we did at the end of last year, just kind of testing out our protocol, but ultimately we see that as kind of our first integration. So we back up all of Polkadot and Kusama's parachains, and that also means we have all of their parachains as well. So effectively, the entire Polkadot ecosystem is something we've already tried to secure in a way as far as data availability goes, but we definitely have some exciting other partners coming down the pipeline here shortly.
Awesome. Thank you for answering my questions.
Of course.
Thanks for the question, Jesse. That's great. Appreciate you coming up, and thanks for listening. Looks like we have another question from Dark Meta. Dark Meta, I'm going to invite you up. If you go ahead and accept that, we'd love to hear from you. Welcome.
Hello, can you hear me?
Can hear you fine.
Perfect. Thank you for taking my question. My name is Andy, and I'm also from VVV, like Jesse. And my question is related to the reward distribution. As far as I understood, the farmers that provide the largest disk space will also get the majority of these rewards. Do you see any concerns related centralization?
Yeah, so this is definitely one of the biggest things on our mind as far as balancing out our consensus protocol goes. So as you mentioned, the rewards will go. The larger the farm, the larger likelihood you have of winning a reward. But we also have what's called block voting on our network. What this allows is effectively, let's say farmer A wins the block, but farmer B, C, and D were very, very close, but not quite within that range. So what voting does is that you can vote on a particular block range that you think is going to win. And if you're within close to that range and it did win, you will still get a reward. So what this allows to see is, you have the main, obviously, potentially larger miner or farmer who might win the block, but those smaller farmers still get some kind of reward as well. Granted, not quite as large as the block reward, but they do still see something come through. So that kind of helps to balance that out. Additionally, we've taken many, many steps to ensure and continue to ensure that our protocol is as low barrier to entry as possible. So our hope is that, granted, while there's no real way to remove those whales, especially on a permissionless network, we don't want hardware or anything like that to be one of those reasons that someone can't start farming. So ideally, you should be able to run on a Raspberry Pi or a laptop and be able to at least participate. And we see Subspace more. It's better to think of the rewards from Subspace more of passive income with hardware you already own, rather than like, oh, I'm going to make this giant $10,000 investment and make all this money back. We really discourage that just because, it does set up a very hard predicament for yourself when it comes to ROI. So definitely want to encourage, in general, we try and encourage existing hardware is going to be your best bet as far as getting a return on your investment. But definitely, a large piece of the puzzle that we're continuously thinking about and trying to evolve, because we want to make sure it's as balanced as possible. But also permissionless and fair, because at a certain point, as you've seen with other networks, it gets a little unfair for the larger holders, like we've seen on Solana, for example, voting to liquidate a whale's position, which is something we're adamantly against as a permissionless network as well. So matter of finding that balance, like most things.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, that was very helpful. Yeah, it's quite tough, yeah, to keep the balance here. Yeah? There is no right answer, yeah, to that question.
Definitely.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you.
And yeah, thank you very much for your question, and thank you for joining us. It looks like we have another question from Colonel 44. Colonel 44, I'm going to invite you up to the stage. If you can go ahead and accept that, we'd love to hear from you. Welcome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Can hear you fine.
Thanks for taking my question. So I bet you probably don't want to say too much on this topic, but kind of building off what you were saying about having already kind of merged with Polkadot or providing data backup for Polkadot. I'm wondering about the possibility of kind of merging further and becoming like the true data availability layer for Polkadot. And, it's able to evolve over time. So I'm wondering if it's possible in the future for Polkadot's 1,000 validators to become executor nodes on Subspace, and for it to really become part of Subspace. And the reason I'm wondering this is I'm trying to start building a project now, and I'm thinking of building on Polkadot, but I really see Subspace as more likely to be the long-term, one of the long-term leaders, maybe overtaking Polkadot. So I'm wondering if it's possible that what I build on Polkadot could become part of Subspace in the future.
So definitely like where your head's at. We've had those same, thoughts and conversations as a team. Obviously, we're not officially related to Polkadot as far as like a professional capacity goes, so it's hard to say what their long-term goals are. But definitely, you will be able to, while it might not be the native Polkadot chain on Subspace, there will be some kind of execution layer that can execute on that Polkadot data availability on Subspace. And furthermore, we are built with Substrate, which is the same framework Polkadot is built with. So there's even a potentiality where anything you develop on Polkadot might be very easy to fork over to Subspace, just because of a natural shared framework there. So it won't be too much developer work on your end. But yeah, it's hard to say where the long-term goals are. We definitely, ideally, will see something along those lines. But obviously, it's a matter of cooperation with the Polkadot team and aligning with their vision.
Okay. So if I can ask a follow-up question, do you see it as like more feasible and likely then that parachains on Polkadot might decide to transition themselves rather than like the entire Polkadot ecosystem?
Same kind of situation, it will be easy for both of those to transition over to Subspace with our data availability layer and the execution layer once that fully is implemented. But it's a matter of what they prefer. We've seen that a lot of the parachains are very loyal to Polkadot, and rightfully so. Obviously, they secure their network when it comes to the relay chain and things like that. But in crypto, everything's up in the air. We're seeing a lot of chains hop across to different protocols, so I wouldn't put anything past anybody.
Okay, cool. Thanks so much.
Of course.
It looks like Wei Li, our chief marketing officer, has stepped up to this stage, and I'm wondering, Wei, if you maybe had some thoughts on that or something you wanted to add. Wei has been working a lot on the front with integrations and talking about, of course, a lot of the long-term values and the way we see this. So, Wei, is there something you wanted to add there?
Thanks, Todd. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay. I guess I just wanted to add some additional detail, right? Like as Justin mentioned, like our goal is not to replace any layer one in the long term, but we are much more like you can see us as the connector and enabler, right, of Polkadot, Kusama, as much as like ideally other ecosystem, right, Ethereum, Solana, and Cosmos, and many more. I think we can definitely share. And probably Justin is going to share a bit more on the new narrative direction that we're thinking. So you can see more like instead of just a deviation from our original plan, it's more instead a more like evolution, right? Like what are we going to build on top of our massively scalable network, right? And like affordable permanent data storage layer. But to answer that question specifically, like ideally in the long term, let's say. Once we roll out our integration across multiple ecosystems. It's not the question about where you build your application anymore, but the fact that with Subspace integration, right, no matter where you build, you'll be able to connect to all other ecosystems supported, right? Like, so in that sense, right, like if someone was building a dApp on a Polkadot parachain, ideally you can seamlessly interact and connect with application or users across, let's say, Solana or even Ethereum, so that your biggest dilemma as a dApp developer is more like what environment is best suited for your specific app. Just like now you will have to decide which, I don't know, like cloud infrastructure or even, let's say, provider, right, is most suited, or like which type of stack works best for your application, and not anymore like which siloed ecosystem you want to join, right? And that's ideally what we want to achieve. So hopefully, yeah, that will address some of the questions for future builders. But yeah, I'll let you, Justin, I guess, to continue with the narrative side.
Yeah, thank you, Wei. So as Wei mentioned, really what we're trying to focus on is being the connector of ecosystems, because I'm sure, as all of us crypto natives know, is that it's very frustrating to have to, try and do things. If you're primarily on Cardano and you want to switch over to Solana, it's just the hugest headache. So that's really what we're trying to help resolve when it comes to this new narrative. And we realized that Subspace is pretty uniquely positioned to take care of that with our execution layer and our storage layer. Really providing that data availability and cross-chain messaging across all ecosystems potentially.
Yeah, that's great. Go ahead.
So I was just going to say, and it's a little bit of a shift from like our prior messaging, where we've really focused on our permanent archival storage prior. And while obviously the storage is still persistent and permanent, it really helps us focus on the scalable data availability layer side of it, which will support layer 2s rather than just like another storage protocol like Filecoin or Arweave or what have you. It's really much more than that, much more than just storage.
Yeah, that really speaks to what the other question was about the data availability layer, which is really where we're looking to focus at this time. And it looks like Michael, VVV, is in the house, I guess. You have a question as well. So Michael, I'm going to invite you up, and we'd love to hear from you. Welcome, and thanks for joining us.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, can hear you great.
Great. Yeah, my question is, how does liquidity enter the ecosystem? Is it, on a practical level, say I wanted to get involved in the ecosystem, how would I enter? Is it MetaMask, or how does it work?
Yeah, so with us being a layer 1, our core liquidity is our Subspace token, our Subspace credit rather, which is rewarded to farmers and executors for transaction fees. So, typical consensus, that's the way our liquidity enters the market. Now, granted, there's other questions as far as like bridging tokens and things like that from other ecosystems, which we don't quite have full implementation spec available for that just yet. But, our core liquidity is going to be the Subspace credit, which is through, just our native token, which is done through the Polkadot wallet, since we're substrate based. So, but for the time being, the Polkadot wallet would be the one to go through.
And I had another question, not exactly related to that, but as far as putting data, because you put your data into a transaction, is that correct? And you basically submit that transaction to the network to get it on, right?
Correct.
Okay. Is there any kind of data that you wouldn't want to put on chain? Would the user discriminate between something that you'd want to have on chain and kinds of data that you just wouldn't want? Is there a safety issue or a privacy issue, or how does that work?
Yeah, so when data is submitted, granted it is public, so I wouldn't submit anything that you want private unless you were to maybe encrypt it or something along those lines. But as from a like data storage layer, everything's stored wrapped in a subspace transaction and stored. So there's no really levels of like class of data. Some data's all of it's saved equally. Now, as far as like having, what if this particular file is on some farmer's hard drive? Luckily, because we erasure encode all of the data, it's all kind of equally spread across the network in its entirety. So no one farmer is holding one file. So equally so, they can't really be held liable for any of that data, as far as we can tell. Granted, obviously a hard stipulation to verify with your local regulations as far as stuff like that goes, because it can really get up in the air, especially with crypto. But ultimately, in our eyes, we don't see that any one farmer is responsible for data. And because we're a permissionless network that's very against censorship, we have no plans on censoring any data or preventing any kind of data to be uploaded. Granted, though, once we hand the network over to the community, that's definitely a decision that the community could vote on if that's something they wanted to implement. But Subspace Labs has no plans to implement anything like that to prevent certain kinds of data, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, censorship resistance is kind of what we've talked about in the past, and that, as Justin said, there will be no censorship of data as we launch the network initially. But this question has come up, Michael, so thank you for asking it. And was there something else? Go ahead.
No, not really. I mean, I've been reading into the protocol, so I mean, there's a lot on there about NFTs, and it seems like you guys are mostly, as far as use cases are concerned, you're mostly talking about NFTs and metaverse as the main use cases for the network. Is that would be your assessment, or is there more to it than?
Yeah, maybe I can add something to it. As Justin hinted earlier, we have, you can say, our phase 2 narrative coming out soon, which is like kind of enrichment on top of what we have shared more publicly right now. So up until now, you can say like the focus has been like bootstrapping and rolling out the network layer, right? Like and testing out that at massive scale, and thanks to our, I guess, like supportive community, we were able to test like 15,000, 20,000 nodes, right? That I guess is like a kind of a new level for layer ones in general. But the next, I guess, phase of our let's say value proposition or use case is actually not just NFT or metaverse, but being the infrastructure layer, right? To support, like enable and connect all other blockchain ecosystems. We have done like a demonstration with Polkadot, right? Like archival. But imagine if with the archival, we can also add a block validation, right, for different blockchains. And then once you do that, and you add also like cross-chain messaging, then with a generalized cross-chain messaging, you can also unlock many things, right? For example, what layer 0 is doing is very similar to what Subspace can enable. So you can say like native cross-chain token swaps, liquidity pool aggregation, or many other things, as well as like say layer 2 data availability needs, right? Especially for like ZK rollups and Validiums, where they need like a truly trustworthy network that's massively distributed and secure, right? With trust minimized bridges and so forth. So on that side, it's more like Celestia. So imagine like Subspace in the ideal future can deliver both, like almost like combination of Celestia and layer 0, right? Or layer 0 can actually use Subspace network ideally as a oracle, right? Like solution to in the future. So I would say it's like a bit more than just NFT and metaverse, but those two would be part of, I guess, the use cases.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for the question, Michael. I'm glad you asked that. And guys, this has been great. This is really what office hours is supposed to be. We always wanted this to be an interactive forum. Justin and I are happy to be up here in Way telling you about the things that are going on, but this is really meant to be more of a discussion, and appreciate the questions, and we hope to get more of them in the future. We're just about at the end of our time, and seeing no other questions, I guess we'll wrap here. But again, it's a great discussion today. Again, our next office hours will be on August 24th, so 2 weeks from today, as we move to a 2-week format. And as a little teaser, I guess, into what we'll be talking about, we'd like to start bringing up other people from the Subspace organization and start to talk about some of the things the rest of the team has been working on. Arthur, who just recently joined us as one of our engineering managers, he is going to speak to the front end applications and how he sees things evolving in the Subspace ecosystem from the front end side. So Arthur will be with us in 2 weeks, and we hope to give you a great overview of some of the things that we see coming down the pipeline. We could talk about things like wallets, block explorers, different front end applications. So if anyone has questions on those things or you'd like to hear about them, we'd love to see you back again. And with that, Justin or Wade, do you have any closing comments?
No, thank you everybody for all the great questions Todd mentioned. It's always great to see you all. And I hope you guys do enjoy our new office hours schedule. We're hoping we can make them more substantive with the biweekly schedule. And we'll also hopefully be sending out a slight agenda right before or day before or so you can at least game plan and prepare any questions you may have. So definitely look forward to seeing you all. And I hope you guys have a good rest of your week.
Thanks for coming, everyone. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.